You're fired. That's the one we know. That's the one we saw on this side of the screen. Let me present to you Mr. George A. Sorial.
So I said to him, well, I know you pretty well. Maybe I should write a book. That's a great idea. Do it. Go ahead and write a book.
He is the co-author of the best-selling book, The Real Deal, My Decade Fighting Battles and Winning Wars with Trump. It's gonna be huge.
And he was very angry about, some journalist had written the book. And, he was saying to me, these guys don't even know me. They sit with me for half an hour, and then they go out and they write a book and they say it's a biography.
Fighting battles, and that's one side of it, but also dealing with a personality like Trump is also requires fighting battles. So there's the two sides, the profession and the character. What character did you have starting off that really helped you with that? And a second part is, what lesson did, let's say, Trump teach you?
What is the first rule of engagement for leaders entering a high-stake environment? I mean, you've been in those meetings, you've been, in the pressure cooker. What's the first rule you'd say getting into those rooms with these people?
Some people say Trump is about Trump first and everything else second. Do you see Trump as a patriot? Does he put the United States first, or does a Trump come first? Hello, everyone, and welcome back with us in another episode of Stars in Our Sky. Today, we definitely have a star with us. One of the people who was once reporting to the most powerful man in the world. A real star in the sky. Stars that their light shines so bright that you could see from anywhere in the world. Without any further ado, let me present to you Mr. George A. Sorial.
Hey,
an attorney.
Welcome, George.
Good.
Happy to have you.
An attorney, an author, a former executive vice president and chief compliance counsel of the Trump Organization. Over more than a decade, he became one of Donald Trump's most trusted strategic advisors, negotiating global development battles, political scrutinies, and high-stake negotiations. He is the co-author of the best-selling book, The Real Deal, My Decade Fighting Battles and Winning Wars with Trump. Highly recommend. Amazing book. And is the founder and managing director of the Washington, D.C. government relations firm, Javelin Advisors. George, welcome with us. We're glad to have you with us on this podcast.
Thank you.
We're so excited to have you with us.
No, thank you. It's my pleasure. And I've never been referred to as a star, but it's been a long week, so I'll take the compliment. But in all seriousness, thank you very much, all of you. It's really my pleasure and my honor to be with all of you, and I very much appreciate it. So thank you.
We're excited to have you with us. With a lot of what's going on in the world right now, you get to hear a lot of things, secondhand news. That's the problem. Some label it fake news, others, and we could talk about the marketing of it all. But the truth is, when you talk to someone who's inside a circle, who has seen people behind closed doors, behind the cameras, it is definitely insightful, especially with everything going on in the world. I think the world wants to get to know you and wants to get to know the person you represented. We make our podcast a lot about the star himself. We would like to get people to know first and foremost, who is George Sorial? And what is your story? How did you get to be at the right hand of one of the most powerful people in the world? A fellow cop, Egyptian heritage. Yeah, you were right there. So who is George Sorial?
Well, I think that's a complicated question. If you guys can figure that out, maybe you could let me know. But in all seriousness, I never scripted my life. I never, sought to do many of the things that I've done. I've just been lucky and fortunate enough to have certain things just present themselves to me. And, maybe I was dumb enough to just seize these opportunities without really knowing where they would take me. But in all seriousness, yes, I have an interesting background. My father is Coptic, grew up in Egypt, and like many Copts, left Egypt in the 60s to finish his medical training. He went to England and he did a fellowship at the Royal College of Surgeons. And that's where he met my mother. And, this is relevant and you'll understand in a few minutes, but my mother is from a very, very small, remote island on the northwest coast of Scotland called the Isle of Lewis. There's a cluster of islands there, Lewis, Harris, Skye. And my mother was born in a town called Stornoway. So she had left the island and was a surgical nurse. That's where she met my father. I was born in Norwich in 1968. Ended up living in Egypt for a year when I was a child. Although my mother was Scottish, they were married in the Coptic church. My mother actually became fluent. My mother was a very interesting woman. She obviously spoke English, but fluent in Gaelic. That language is still used in remote parts of Scotland, but learned how to speak Arabic. We lived in Egypt for a while when I was young. Came back to England, and then in 1970, there were a shortage of physicians in the United States, and like many of my father's friends, we all immigrated to the U.S. And actually, interestingly enough, my mother and father left on a boat. I was obviously with them. I was a small child, 2 years old, so we left Southampton, crossed the Atlantic on a boat, and arrived in New York. So how is all this relevant? I grew up I spent most of my childhood in northern New Jersey. I ended up going to school in Boston. I did a JD MBA, an LLM, also undergraduate, all at Boston University. Then I came back to New York and I started out in government. Then I spent some time in law firms, and it was around end of 2001, early 2002, where I bumped into Trump, a person that took my life on a completely different trajectory. I was representing a group of Wall Street investors. They were bankers that were trying to build a residential community and a golf course in northern New Jersey, and that's where Trump Bedminster is now. And along came Trump. Trump bought them out, and I would say it was a very typical Donald Trump transaction. Everything was done in 30 days. It was fast. All the initial investors, he treated them very fairly. Many of them are still members of Trump Bedminster today. But Trump came in, bought out the project, and at the groundbreaking ceremony, I just went and introduced myself to him, and told him that my mother was from Lewis, and I'd spent many summers there, and that kind of ignited a friendship. I mean, it's really not many people even know about Lewis or the town of Stornoway. The fact that both of our mothers were born and grew up there, born in the same hospital, is kind of remarkable. So I ended up, at the time, I was, a young lawyer. I was living in Manhattan, and I was looking to purchase an apartment. He had just finished building Trump World Tower. So I ended up buying an apartment from him in Trump World Tower. And that sort of led to a whole bunch of different things. I became president of the board of Trump World Tower. He started to give me legal work. And then end of 2006, he called me into his office, and Ivanka, Don, Eric, the whole team were there. And, he said, look, I just bought all this land in Scotland, just outside of Aberdeen. I have 2,000 acres. We're going to build a golf course. We're going to build a hotel and some houses. And, you're going to come and work for me. We're going to honor our mothers together. It's going to be great. So, I said to him, look, that sounds, interesting, but I don't know anything, about real estate development. I was a transactional lawyer, corporate M&A. I did a little bit of real estate, but his response was really one that it kind of changed my whole life. He said, look, even better that way, I'll teach you how to do things the way I like them done, and we'll have some fun. And again, we'll honor our mothers. So, I had one of these moments where I'd actually just become a partner, which anyone listening, if you're a lawyer, that's kind of the holy grail in law firms. You work to become a partner. So I went to the management committee of my firm and said, hey, look, I was just offered, a job, Donald Trump organization. And, they said, no problem. You can go and work for him. You'll get tired of it. You'll come back in a year. Well, I didn't get tired of it, and I ended up spending many years there. And, 2015, all of a sudden he runs for president. So, maybe to take a step back, my role there, I was initially executive vice president and counsel. I did some legal work, but I spent the majority of my time in real estate development, everything from site acquisition, project management, taking projects through the planning process. The projects I spent the most time on was I built Trump International Golf Links in Aberdeen. Along with the team, I did the Trump Turnberry deal on the west coast of Scotland. I also did the Trump Doonbeg acquisition and redevelopment in Ireland and a number of other projects. But when he became president, everything started to change. I got pulled back into the legal world. I became chief compliance counsel globally, and that kind of led me into where I am now. I started to spend a lot of time in Washington, started to deal with a lot of the incoming from the House and the Senate. Many of the investigations, and headaches that you hear about now, initially were in my realm. And after about 2.5 years into the first administration, I just felt that it was time to move on. I was still very close with the president and his family. He treated me very well. My wife also, I should say, was his assistant for many years. So, we're a complete Trump family. But, I felt it was the right thing in the right time to move on. And, I ended up leaving the company in 2019. I published a book through HarperCollins. I promoted the book, and then I got very involved in the world of Washington, and I did a number of projects with the White House, the State Department, the Department of Defense, or as we say now, the Department of War. And I formed my own firm. And when he was elected for his second term, I got together with some of my colleagues and we combined forces. Keith Schiller is another longtime Trump organization, started his career in the Navy, NYPD. Then he was global head of security for the organization and Trump's personal bodyguard for 2 decades. And my other founding member, Rob Seiden, an attorney, legendary New York prosecutor for 15 years. And he has his own boutique law firm and investigations firm, but we did a lot of work with him in the organization as well. So the three of us came together and, we created Javelin Advisors, and that's really where I spend most of my time now. Government relations, lobbying, with a heavy emphasis on representing foreign governments, foreign armies. We do a lot of work with the Department of War and on the defense side. So it's been a really interesting, again, none of this was scripted. I was supposed to be a doctor like everybody else, from the Coptic community that came over during those times. Sadly, I disappointed my parents. I went in a completely different direction, but it's been interesting. And, I thank God, for everything I've done. I'm very grateful. It's been a very, very interesting career.
You make me laugh because my parents, they thought they were very gracious. And they said, Habibi, you could do anything you want. Okay.
Yeah.
You could, the sky is
This podcast is sponsored by eSky, a revolutionary AI-powered state-of-the-art learning management system for small to mid-size enterprises.
limit. You could be doctor, you could be lawyer, you could be engineer.
Right.
Choose.
Sky's honest. And that was a similar, I think mine was really narrow. I mean, look, it all takes us some time to find out who we are, but I realized pretty quickly that, the medical field was not for me, but, I come from a family that's mostly physicians and engineers. And, my life took a little different direction.
So I know that Rian, Gabby, and myself, after listening and reading your book, we have a ton of questions, a ton. And we don't have all the time in the world. So we're going to try to go in an orderly fashion, because I know we're all going to try to get in our questions all at the same time. So Rian, do you want to launch us off with one of the questions that you're dying to ask George?
Of course, mate. George, just so happy to be talking to you again.
Thank you.
Basically for me, the book really, really touched me. I gotta say, it's nice to see, and to hear all of this stuff about, President Trump, the probably the most powerful person in the world, but from, your perspective, the more humanizing, side of it, which I found really, really interesting. Stuff like the leaving little notes on people's, desks and all that kind of stuff, being really into it and being into the details, but then really pulling out of it. I think it's great, the way that you portrayed him. And so, yeah, just a quick question. I mean, your book frames business as warfare. What is the first rule of engagement for leaders entering a high-stake environment? I mean, you've been in those meetings, you've been, in the pressure cooker. What's the thing? What's the first rule you'd say, for getting into those rooms with these people?
Well, I mean, I think you have to have a winning, positive mindset. And ultimately, I mean,
Yeah.
just to be blunt, you want to win. I mean, how do you define a win depends on, it's fact specific. It depends on the circumstance. But, obviously you're entering any negotiation, you're having a discussion, you want to try to get as many, points for yourself to ultimately prevail. I think,
Yeah.
there's some unspoken rules that, I've always adhered to and they served me well. I think it's fine to fight hard. I think it's fine to want to win, but you need to really have an ethical, moral compass. And that's something that I always was very proud of, that I never compromised no matter what I did. And I've been involved, admittedly in some very, very controversial, matters, but I always did it in a way where I felt that I was true to myself and I never compromised my morals. Again, life is difficult. I had once a law professor say to me, if you want an easy, uncomplicated life, there's a hairdressing school, and nothing against hairdressers, but the point he was making, you can go down the road and, you can choose to do something that, is less stressful. But I made a very different choice. So I think I always enter, any discussion with a mindset that, these are goals that I would like to achieve. And I think you do need to, frame any discussion thinking about, what outcome am I trying to achieve? I mean, sometimes you can wing it. Sometimes you have to wing it. But I think you serve yourself better by really knowing your subject matter and knowing what a win looks like for you. And, hopefully you can do it in a way where the other party, is also happy, especially if it's a negotiation that's going to result in a business relationship. It's really not productive to obliterate the other side because you're going to be working together. And, ideally, if everybody could get to a place, where they're at least satisfied, I think that's a win.
I think it's a great answer, mate. I think it's there's a lot to say, and these days, especially when it gets to like kids sports and they start handing out, participating trophies and stuff like that. I do believe, when you get into negotiations and, you get into the room, you got to have that spirit of, I'm going to win this, or I'm going to win certain things, and I'm willing to give away certain things. So I think it must be pretty interesting being a fly on the wall with some of your negotiations, mate.
Yeah, I mean, it's been, it's been interesting. And, an analogy that we sometimes use is, we're lawyers, we're hired guns. We're like mercenaries. Give us a specific direction and, we'll get the job done. But again, I always tried to conduct myself, at the end of the night, I lay in bed, I need to be able to sleep. And I think really, you can be tough and you can be fierce in your style, but I think if you do it with honesty and integrity, it's much more effective. So again, those are principles, that I teach my kids. You know your stuff, I think is important. A concept that I write about in my book all the time, which I really felt was kind of developed more by Trump, is you have to really like what you're doing. You have to enjoy what you're doing, or you're never really going to master it. You're never going to be very good at it. But again, I think being prepared, knowing your stuff, loving what you do, all very important. But I think being, a person that has a moral code is what makes you shine above others. And I would like to say, I don't mind if people would say, oh, that guy Sorial, maybe he's not the smartest guy, maybe he's not the fastest guy. But I'm very happy when I hear that people will say, well, he's the straightest guy. He's not, you get what you see. He flies straight, and, he's an honest person. Those are the type of words that I would like people to use when they describe me.
I mean,
Love that.
keeping to the war theme that Rian started us on, Gabby, what's your follow-up question regarding that, so that we can have that continuum, if you don't mind it?
Go Lean It. Go Lean It offers a symphony of efficiency through lean services and solutions, driving scalable and sustainable results. Visit goleanit.com.
Yeah, I mean, like, obviously, a part of your job is fighting battles, and that's one side of it. But also dealing with a personality like Trump is also requires fighting battles. So there's the two sides: the profession and the character. One is like, what character did you like? Did you have starting off that really helped you with that? And a second part is, what lesson did, let's say, Trump teach you to kind of be ready for that type of position?
Well, Trump is, there's a lot of people that say things about him. I mean, I worked with him in one way or another for almost 20 years, and I really enjoyed it. He treated me very well. I mean, he's a fascinating person to work with. I think like many others, what you see behind the scenes at times is different from what gets projected, on television or through the media, or what, people say about him. I really enjoyed working with him. I felt that he always supported me. He gave me a lot of responsibility. He didn't micromanage me. Again, I would like to think that if you asked him, what about this Sorial guy? He may say, well, his intelligence was mediocre, but I trusted him. And
I doubt he'd say that. Yeah.
well, but I'd like to think that he say I trusted him, and he understood what I wanted, and he worked very hard, to accomplish goals. But I really enjoyed working with him. And I think that also even transcended into the presidency. I think, obviously taking on a profound role like that. And, if you think about it for a minute, if you look at his career, again, I don't think he could have ever, he started out as a real estate developer, and then he branched out and wrote best-selling books. And then he had a top television show, and, then he gets into politics, and, towards the end of his career, he is almost 80. He becomes the president of the United States.
It's incredible.
Yeah, so I think it's rare that you have individuals that achieve that level of excellence on so many fronts. So, I enjoyed working with him. I don't know if I'm answering your question. Feel free to refocus me, but I enjoyed it. Every day was exciting. Every day was a challenge. I always knew where I stood with him. That was another thing that, a lot of people complain about, oh, I don't know where I stand with my boss, or, I don't know if I'm going to get this promotion. Believe me, I always knew where I stood with him. If he wasn't happy, he wasn't shy about letting everybody know. But it was always done in a, respectful. You could have a tremendous argument with him, and everything was said, everything was put out on the table, and then ultimately was resolved, and people moved on. I mean, there was really, the ethos in the organization was very strong that, you have to really love what you're doing. You have to care about what you're doing. So when you have a group of people that are working very hard, that enjoy and love what they're doing, you're going to have conflicts. I mean, I used to say to people on my team, if you don't get angry and if there's not a conflict, like it shows me that you don't really care. If you care about something and you're passionate and you're not achieving it, sometimes tempers flare. I mean, that's just the reality, of life. And, contrary to what a lot of people are trying to teach our kids now, the world is a tough place. The world is a very unforgiving place. So you really need to be, thick-skinned and confident. And, maybe this answers your question.
Mhm.
If there was incoming,
You're fired.
no,
Right?
well, not
That was one thing. That was the big poster in New York.
We
Right?
hated
By Wall Street,
really,
right? Was
yeah.
that really the type of person when you talk about?
No,
keeping-
on the contrary.
That's the one we know. That's the one we saw on this side of the screen. Everybody
Yeah.
remembers that you're fired. Was that the Donald Trump you know?
No, I mean, look, sometimes in any organization, people need to be fired. I mean, it's just, what else are you going to do if you have somebody that's not performing? But again, I was with him a long time. I don't think it was something that he enjoyed doing. I think he would go out of his way to try to help people out, maybe put them in different positions, move them around. I mean, it wasn't uncommon in the organization where you would have a person that was, in one role. I mean, look at me as an example. I was a lawyer. I really had no business going and building a golf course, but, guess what? I figured it out. So, he must have seen some basic things in me, and a lot of skill sets are transferable. It's another lesson that I try to tell my kids every day. Don't be afraid to go out of the box. If you're smart, you're confident, and you work hard, you can really do a lot, and you can do a lot of things that you would never expect that you could do. I mean, I think the truth of the matter is there are some limitations. I mean, if somebody asked me to, go to a heart transplant now, it's probably not going to end up very good for the patient. But, short of some really, truly unique, very difficult things, most professions, most occupations, most things can be learned by a person that has an open mind, has a little bit of self-confidence and a little bit of discipline, to study and go out and ultimately give it a try. So I think that old saying, you can do anything you want. I agree with it. 98% of the things you can do almost anything you want, and I'm living proof of it. My career has pivoted multiple times in directions that I never, again, I never scripted, I never planned. The opportunity presented itself and I took it.
George, the book, The Real Deal, when I read it, describes a very different Trump than, we see on TV, than what the story says, than the regular narrative of whatever everybody else gets to see. You got to live up close with him. But you also at the same time describe fighting battles and winning wars with Trump. Can you, very quickly describe to us who is Trump that we don't get to see? Plus, what is the toughest war you had to win with him?
Well, that's a really interesting question. I mean, I could tell you the purpose of my book was really, again, it wasn't anything that I never said to myself, oh, I need to write a book. I was having, the genesis of the book. Maybe it's helpful to know. I was in the Oval Office one day and he was very angry about, some journalist had written the book and, he was saying to me, these guys don't even know me. They sit with me for half an hour, and then they, they go out and they write a book and they say it's a biography. So again, being, I don't want to say I was an opportunist. That's really not the right word, but I said to myself, I could probably write a book. So I said to him, well, I know you pretty well. Maybe I should write a book. And I kind of got that 30 seconds of staring without saying anything. And then he said, that's a great idea. Do it. Go ahead and write a book. And I think I should say,
It's gonna be huge.
yeah, no, he was like, makes it great and all that. But I've done a lot of interviews and, people always want to know, well, did he edit it? And the honest truth is the book that you have is the book that he has. Okay. I did allow a lawyer, the chief legal officer in the Trump organization, to do a one read just to make sure that I didn't disclose anything that I shouldn't. I was a lawyer, so I still have ongoing obligations, but they didn't meddle with it. It wasn't edited. Eric wrote a chapter. I mean, it's a really very straightforward presentation. And what I was trying to do, I could have written many things, but I think, as you pointed out earlier, Malek, I really wanted to humanize him. And I thought the best way of doing that is by telling a series of stories. What I saw, what it was like to work with. I probably have at least a couple of dozen other individuals in the organization that kind of chipped in. And I should say, going back to your comment about you're fired, there are many people in the organization. I mean, I was there for 14, 15 years, but there are many people that were there for a lot longer, many talented people. And there are many people that are still there. There are people that have been there for 30, 40 years. And again, these are people with options that could leave and, do whatever they wanted. So I think the fact that the retention rate was so strong at the organization speaks volumes to what it was like working with not just him, but his family. I really enjoyed it. So maybe to answer your question, I'll try to answer it directly. I apologize. Sometimes I ramble. But, I'll just tell you a story of just one of many things that I saw. When we were building the project in Aberdeen, he had read in the newspaper that just down the road, a few miles down in a town, there was a child that had some medical issues, and he was now disabled, and he needed to have a ramp and a bathroom. His house needed to be modified to accommodate a disabled child. And, he didn't make a big issue out of it. He called me up one day, and, I was in Scotland, and he told me, go down there and take a look, bring one of our construction team people with you and figure out what they want and just do it. He said, don't make a big thing out of it. Just whatever they need, just do it. Let's just help this kid out. And I saw that over and over and over again. And, again, I had some very major conflicts for him. I remember after very difficult planning, and this was something that was all over when we first applied for the project in Aberdeen. We were initially rejected, and, it was all over the media. And, it was a really, really challenging day for me. And, yes, there was screaming and yelling. And, as you can imagine, we had invested millions and we stumbled. But I remember later that night, it was about 1:00 in the morning, UK time, he called me. And he first asked me, he said, I know it's probably been a really bad day, but like, are you okay? And, I said, yeah, I'm fine. And he told me, look, sometimes when you have a defeat and you come back and you win after being defeated, it's even better. And he had this whole thing, and it was something that my father also used to say. You really see what a person is made of. When it's easy, it's easy. But you see what a person is made of in how they manage conflict, adversity, and especially failure. We all fail. There's nothing wrong with failing. If you haven't failed, you haven't really tried. But how do you handle yourself when you fail? So he said to me, we failed here, but we're going to come back. We're going to get this thing done. So he told me, put on your bulletproof vest, get a good night's sleep, and let's get up tomorrow morning and let's fight like hell. And that's what we did. It took us 2 years, but we ended up winning. And that's where, we have a golf course, a hotel. They built a second golf course there. It was opened about a year ago. It's now a thriving property that employs hundreds. So that, those are just a couple of stories. I mean, if I had 10 hours to talk with you, I could probably give you 10 hours of stories like that. And again, these are not stories that are unique to me. If you speak to anybody that works in the company, they all have those similar stories.
Cancel.org, redefining global consulting, delivering world-class solutions through proven methodology, measurable and sustainable results.
Nice. Rian, do you want to take us off to the second topic once, we just finished exploring war?
Yeah, man. I mean, for me, George, I'm a big fan of the book, obviously, like I said earlier, but I want to flip this around a little bit. So is there any deal or any negotiations or anything that you can think about that you're proud that you didn't do? And what signals, told you to step back?
I mean, I don't want to get into any, specific,
Oh no, please don't share any
situations that,
secrets.
I don't want to malign anything, but, I will say this. Yeah, there's a lot of, we used to have a saying, and it was another very Trumpy, it was his saying, but I lived it and I really learned, I grew to understand it, is that really sometimes the best deals that you make are the ones that you walk away from. And
Yeah.
I never understood that, initially, but, now I do. And it's kind of like a paradigm sometimes in life. I actually was just literally before we started this interview, I just was speaking with a colleague of mine who, he had a big setback, but, I told him, look, in my life, you really never know, what the road is. You never know what the plan is. In my personal experience, moments that I thought at the time were tremendous losses, tremendous setbacks. How did this happen? What did God do to me? How did I deserve this? But when you fast forward a year later, you say to yourself, you know what? Had I not had this stumble, had we not had this setback, well, this door wouldn't have opened and I wouldn't have had this experience. Or so I think, we have to accept sometimes that things don't go our way. We have to accept that failure is a part of life. The world that I lived in, and you talk to anybody that did real estate development, you look at 100 deals before you find one, that sort of makes sense. And then when you look at it, at 1,000, before you find the one that you're going to do. So what am I saying? You spend a lot of time looking at lousy opportunities. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I think, sometimes the smartest way to handle, a transaction, an opportunity, or something that you're not 100% comfortable is to walk away. It's another theme that I've always lived by. And again, this is from my parents. You have to trust your instinct. You have to trust your gut. You know, God gave us a lot of senses, and I think people try to suppress them. But what I encourage, again, my own children, become in tune with those things. When you have hair on your neck that's standing up, there's a reason for it. Try to really hone in, understand these things, and develop these instincts. And, as they say, you trust your gut. And again, if you're hardworking and you have the proper moral fiber, and I include in it, I'm not shy, to talk about my strong faith in God. Am I a perfect person? Far from it. But, I ask every day for forgiveness, and I have the fortitude to realize that, my life really, it's not in my own hands. I'm just here for a short period of time, and whatever we accomplish, but we have much higher goals for eternity, if that makes sense.
Definitely makes sense, mate. I think, and that's probably the thing that, myself, Gabby, and Malik aligns over a lot is our, views of religion and, where we stand with God, and the fact that, we will, for me in my faith journey or whatever, I'm getting to the same point where it's like, you know what, if he's not in control, then I'm definitely not in control, and then everything is out of control. So, for me, it's becoming a big deal to make a point of putting things, giving him, the authority over my life. And, to me, that's a great thing. It's scary at moments, but, it's one of those things that I feel, if we don't have that in our lives, then we're never gonna achieve what we want to. So thank you for that. That was a great answer.
No, I agree, and it's really simple. Again, I keep saying the same thing. The advice I give my kids came from my own parents. Stay close to the church, have a good relationship with God, and you have nothing to worry about. And that's really what I tell my kids now, have a good relationship with the church, stay close with God, and you don't even need me. You'll be fine. No,
That's awesome.
Gabby?
Yeah, on the on the theme of faith, I mean, I definitely see it throughout your book, George. I see also, even the way you start the book, you started with a very biblical verse on be strong and courageous, right? For I will be with you. The God tells you I'll be with you wherever you go, right? And I think it's very relevant because since you travel across the world, I see it when we talk. Every time we talk, you bring up God. But talk to me a little bit more about like how does that work with your relationship with Trump? Is it always like just business, or do you guys actually there's a faith aspect to it as well? Like is there like a spiritual aspect to it? I'm curious to know, or is just we just talk business all the time and it ends at that?
No, no, far from it. I mean, I would start by answering the question, what's the most basic, if you're going to ask, what is this person? Like the most basic answer, you're going to say, are they good or are they evil? Right. When it all comes down to it, what side of, of the coin are they on? And, I would say unequivocally, Trump is a very, very good person. I don't see him through rose-colored lenses. He says and does things that I may not say and do. He has a very unique style. It works for him. Some like it, some don't like it. But I think he's a person that is on the right side. He's good side. I never had, in-depth spiritual discussions with him. I would frequently talk to him about Coptic community. I would always tell him that the Coptic community was behind him. I would frequently lament with him about things that were happening in Egypt. Obviously anybody who knows the history of the Copts understands that we are, a church of martyrs. There's been a lot of suffering over centuries, really starting with St. Mark. So I would talk to him about things that would happen, in the news if a church was burned, if a priest were killed, and even more so, actually, when he became president. And I would also talk to others, people like Jared Kushner, and others in the administration about, just my frustrations. A group of tourists or pilgrims, were shot going to a monastery. Believe me, he'd be the first to know about it from me. And I found that he really cared about these issues. And, I might have mentioned this, in the past, but when he was elected for the first term, it was really a fascinating period. My office was on the 26th floor of Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue, and his office was down the hallway from me. And really, a government was being formed. It was really fascinating. We had all these, White House. No one really expected that, in the first term that he would win. It started out really as kind of, well, it's talk, and he's going to run from Fifth Avenue. But then, he got out and he really campaigned. And I think really on Super Tuesday, when he swept all those states, it started to become really clear that, he may win. But I think if everyone was being honest, it wasn't expected. So there was so much going on, and, the transition team was there. And I should say, I was chief compliance counsel then, or made chief compliance counsel. So I was on the organization side, never, part of the administration. That just wasn't, for me. But amidst all this chaos, and it was chaos, okay, because everybody was behind and we were trying to figure this out. And, you had a group of New York real estate people, trying to figure out, all right, well, how are we going to put together a cabinet and all that? But amidst all this, he called me to his office one day, and he said to me, do you have any way of reaching your Pope? So I told him, actually I do. I'm on the advisory board of Agora University, which was created by our Pope, and I can reach him. He said, that's good, because I want to send him a letter, and I want to meet him, and I want to tell him that things are going to be different for Christians in the Middle East. And, they exchanged letters, and, They still have, a relationship. I don't think they've ever met. There's a whole series of stories. I'm sure they will, but he's met some of our priests. He's met some of our bishops, and he has been very vocal in his support of not just the Coptic community, but, the original Christian communities in the Middle East. I mean, people sometimes think that, Christ was born in London. He wasn't. Obviously. So he is very, very supportive. And I think he really found that the way some of the original Christian communities were treated were like they were repugnant to him. It was just something that really bothered him. And he's been very vocal in his support of Christians around the world. And, for us, he's recognized us on Global Coptic Day several times. He's tweeted about the Coptic community. And I know he's been very vocal with leaders in the Middle East about how they treat Christians, because I know people in the room that have told me what he's been said. So again, I think that is probably something that people aren't expecting to hear. I don't know if he reads the Bible or goes to church or any of that stuff. I don't know. I'm not going to opine on any of that, but I think some of the actions that I just described speak much louder about what he has inside him. So I hope that that's a helpful way of answering that question.
This podcast is sponsored by eSky, a revolutionary AI-powered state-of-the-art learning management system for small to mid-size enterprises.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I think we can all agree that one of the most famous names in the world that's recognized by everyone is Trump. There is no one in the world right now, places where you cannot get water to reach, they know Donald Trump. However, he is also arguably, allegedly, the most controversial character. You either love him and you're like a Trumper and make America great again, MAGA hat style person, or you have Trump derangement syndrome. You hear his name and you almost implode. Is there a story that you've personally lived, whether it's the Russia, investigations or other ones that you're privy that you could speak of, which highlights that contrast of reality versus what the media portrays to help our viewers get to see a different angle that they normally wouldn't see?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I think what you see is obviously a part of him. And, that's something that I think I need to comment on as well, is there's no hiding Trump. What you see is what you get. Okay. And I think he was never a multi-faced or anything like that. If that guy has something to say, he says it. And I think that type of candor, maybe it rubs some people the wrong way, but, I try not to, see him, that expression through rose-colored lenses. There's some things that he, does. I mean, some of the, recent discussions with the Catholic Pope Leo, I kind of wish they wouldn't have happened. But, again, to be fair, if you want to stray into the world of politics, don't think that you're going to get immunity because you wear the veil, of a member of the clergy. Trump very much believes in speaking his mind, and he very much believes that when he is under attack, he will attack back. And again, not my, personal choice, but I think as someone once said, you have to let Trump be Trump, and none of us are perfect. We all have our different, idiosyncrasies. And I think you just have to accept the good with the bad. Now, asking to explain, what the term that we use in the United States, the Trump derangement syndrome, I don't know. I mean, I think and I'm trying to be, respectful. I don't really believe that I need to be inclusive of everyone. Do I want this Satan to sit down at my table with my kids? No, I don't think so. But I just think that there has been this growing mentality that everything is okay and there is no black and white. And to some extent, I'm the last person that is going to condemn anyone. Each person can live their life. What I again try to teach my kids is that we don't hate anyone. I mean, we were given the extreme example of, we pray for our enemy. So I certainly don't think that, regardless of how you're living your life, I'm not going to hate you. But it's my right to disagree. And it's my right to reject certain things. It's my right to set my own moral compass. Again, I'm not going to harm or infringe on anyone, but, don't tell me how I need to live my life or who I need to associate with. And certainly don't impose that on my children. And I think a lot of that thinking, is why Trump kind of says it as it is, and he doesn't sugarcoat things. He presents an issue just in its bare, kind of naked, crude self. And, we just live in a society now where there's so much nonsense, there's so much manipulation, of language. And, we call something that should be called, anything but, because we don't want to hurt somebody's feelings. And, we have this attitude that we can say and do anything, and men can become women and women can become men. And there's 180 different genders. And, I'm not just picking on that stuff, but I think, like it or not, there are some things that are right and there are some things that are wrong. And as a society, we strayed away from some of that. And I think when you have a guy like Trump, and again, I mean, it's a really, really difficult question, and I don't even know if I've answered it, but, I think Trump is a guy that calls a spade a spade. And, in this hypersensitive, ridiculous, anything goes, world that we think we live in now, people are too easily offended. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having a difference of opinion, difference of lifestyle, difference of religion. We can be different. That's fine. As long as we respect each other. And I think a lot of that has been lost on both sides of the aisle.
Oh, yeah.
A question from our viewers, and I would call that the killer question as we try to wrap up together our podcast. When people knew that we're meeting with you, we got a slew of questions. One of the ones that came to the surface by more than one person was, people make speculations about the person that's constantly in front of the camera. Some people say Trump is about Trump first and everything else second. Yet some people, and your book says slightly a different story. Do you see Trump as a patriot? Does he put the United States first, or does a Trump come first and the United States come second?
Well, let's think about it. Okay, he had a pretty good life before any of this political business. He could have continued to run the organization. It's a company that, I loved with all my heart. I loved working there. I enjoyed every day. He had a pretty good life prior to this. And, what has this political world brought him? Headache, investigations, impeachments, assassination attempts, attacks on his wife, his family, attacks on his companies. He's been indicted, convicted. I mean, he had a pretty good life before any of this. So I think anybody that questions his intentions, I mean, I lived through a lot of this. I mean, he had this voice in his head. It really started around 2012, maybe earlier. Should I run? Should I do this? This country is headed in such the wrong direction. Something that my father used to tell me all the time, America is the envy of the world. Well, it was trending in a very different direction. The country was falling apart. I think, domestically, we still have a major problem. There are a lot of forces here. As a guy that lived through 9/11, that was only 25 years ago, but at that time, the country was united. And I don't think you'd find a single person that would say, you know, anything other than, I'm very proud to be an American. I'm proud to live here. Well, how did we get in a short period of time, 25 years later, where we have at least a generation, maybe two, and I don't mean to be the older guy that's picking on the younger kids. I have a lot of optimism for our kids, and I think, they are growing up in a very difficult world, more complicated than me. But how did we find ourselves in a situation now where we have all these kids that America's a bad place, America is the oppressor, America is evil? I mean, I can answer that question. That's what they were taught. But you see my point. In 25 years, how did we go from this united country, to where we are now? And I think Trump had this little voice in his head that kept on growing louder and louder. And it was a really simple voice that if people like me don't do it, who's going to do it? I mean, our political class was failing. The United States was plummeting globally. Whatever you want to say now, I mean, I'm out there. I work with a lot of different foreign governments. I see it every day. There is a palpable, it's a combination of fear and respect for the United States. And the word consequence now actually has some meaning. So, kind of a long-winded way, only a patriot, okay, that is really motivated by, look, he had all the success, he had the money, he had the accolades on many, many different levels, as we talked about in the beginning. I mean, the guy was successful on many fronts. Who would carry this burden, okay, and then come back to it again, take a round two? I mean, he's turning 80 years old. You really think he needs this? If there was just some, motivation other than people that conquer, at these levels have motivations well beyond, they're satisfying their own, means or desires or goals. I mean, I think he really felt if somebody like me doesn't take this on, and, again, he made his whole career, giving people what they wanted. He used to tell me, people ask me all the time, how did I get so successful? And, he'd say, George, it's really easy. I see what people want and I give it to them. And I think politically, that's really exactly what he did. People were fed up. You had this kind of unconventional guy, that was say and do anything and, attack. And, if you look back to at the people he defeated, I mean, the Clintons, the Bushes, I mean, his path to victory was really not an easy one. So I think it's very simplistic to make the statement that, oh, this guy is self-motivated, he's in it for Trump. But I think if you really look at the facts and you look at what he went through, something much bigger, can only motivate, because really, look at all the hits that he took and still takes along the way. And he gets up every day. I mean, he's in China now. I mean, this is a very consequential trip. I mean, he's really, the world now is being reset. And you're seeing, a lot of industrialized countries or countries that went through a later period of industrialization, India, Pakistan, countries like the Republic of Georgia, Uzbekistan, Africa, are emerging along with China now as really the world powers. And, many European nations have been marginalized. So, I put, Trump is really, he's put the United States back on the map. You may, love or hate his style, but, only someone that has really broad, I'm trying to help humanity and I'm trying to help my nation, would be able to muster the strength that he needs every day to go out and fight these endless battles. I mean, what else can they do to this guy?
Yeah, no, look, George, first of all, thank you for that insight. It's remarkable, especially that you are so close. I think if you give us 10 other hours, we'd most probably consume them all, learn something in every single minute of those 10 hours. Uh, uh, Unfortunately, I out of respect for your time, I want to try to wrap us together in this wonderful podcast, which we've been privileged to have. There are two things. Gabby, our podcast is known for the fireside questions that Gabby usually closes with to get people to get to know you better. But before that, I have one question very quickly.
Sure.
If you had to choose a fruit to represent you, what type of fruit would you be? For example, I always say I'd be a watermelon. It's hard on the outside, soft on the inside. It's known for like the fun side in parties. It's got high contrast. What fruit would you be and why? We care more about the why because it's going to make us know you better.
I kind of like mangoes. I mean, it's funny when you were saying watermelon, that is one of my favorite fruits. Nothing like a good hot, cold watermelon on a hot day. Mango, I don't know. It's I guess, tougher on the outside, sweet on the inside. It has a big seed, which represents a big heart. I care deeply about what I do and the people around me. So I hope nobody's ever asked me. I've been asked a lot of questions, but that was a pretty unique one, but I'll go with mangoes.
Amazing. Gabby?
All right.
Fire away, my friend.
So these are very quick, short answers. First off, let's start with best piece of legal advice you've ever received.
Never quit. Keep fighting.
Awesome. One word to describe Donald Trump's negotiation style.
Tenacious.
Biggest risk you've ever taken in a deal.
That's a real good one. Biggest risk I ever took was, I take it many times, going and trying to tackle things that I have no understanding,
like the golf course. Like the golf course.
Of course, like going into political world, again, just life is a risk. Sometimes you just have to go for it.
Yeah. Especially
take a shot rather than hesitate. Was it you, Malak, the great Gretzky line?
Yes. You miss all the shots you don't get. You don't try, right? That's the
I've lived my life like that.
That's awesome.
most important quality in a business partner, and especially right now that you're
trust and integrity without equal.
How do you prepare for a high-stake negotiation?
I study. I master my subject. I try to learn everything, and I also try to triangulate. Think of what my adversary is going to view as a win. Keep your cards close to your chest, and try to, again, despite my earlier comments about winning, try to create a scenario where all sides feel that they won. That's how you really make lasting peace. That's how you make a lasting deal. At the end of the day, a contract is just a piece of paper. The people that are signing it have to trust and respect and want to work with each other, or you're going nowhere.
And finally, give us advice to your younger self, just starting in law, but as well as like an advice to our listeners.
Again, I think keep it really simple. Be true to yourself. Keep a strong faith in God. Stay close, to that side of you. Don't compromise it for anyone. Don't have fear about new opportunities. Embrace them. Try to find a path that you really like and enjoy. And just, be grateful. Be grateful for everything that you have in life. Really, when you look back at most problems, they're not as bad as you perceive them to be. But be grateful and, try to have some fun along the way. I think it's really important. Try to have fun and try to help people around you and, try to lift people up. I think we need a lot more of that now in this world. We all need to help each other and we need to lift each other up.
Amazing.
Amazing.
George,
Awesome. Thank you.
thank you so much for being
There is inspirational, man.
This is, we'd love it if you can come back. Absolutely. I think we'll have a lot more and our viewers will want to hear more from you. This was very inspirational. Thank you for taking the time. We're very proud to have a Coptic person that actually was that close to the president, but also someone with that kind of moral integrity and the ethics that you've described and that strong heart like the core of a mango, right? That is solid, unwavering, that's hard to break. So thank you very much. You guys were tuned in to Stars in Our Sky. Steve, keep with us, ring that bell, register, subscribe, and thank
I
you.
appreciate it, George. Really nice. It's a blessing. Thank you so much for being with us.
And I've enjoyed it. I really enjoy doing these sorts of things. And it'd be an honor. I'm happy to come back and talk to you anytime.
That is wonderful. Oh, thank you.
Good job, mate.
All right. Thank you all.
Keep it going.
Bye-bye.